When I ran last term, I did give a sweeping vision for things I wanted to see implemented in order to build upon the work of my truly talented predecessor, Miss Alicia Matson, who left tremendously hard shoes to fill. My promises centered around these themes: accessibility, advancing institutional knowledge, and accountability. And here was a copy of, I'm going to stick it up here, of one of my campaign flyers from that time that flesh out those principles a little bit more. And yes, I realize, and I also am frustrated with buzzword template campaigning, which we all seem to fall into. So let me tell you specifically what I've done to fulfill each of those promises, or at least begin to fulfill them. Because the fact is, there is still much work to do, and that's why I'm rerunning. So I'll give you some summaries of some things, and hopefully I will not ramble too long. I have been a regular author and contributor to both LP News and Liberty Pledge in order to educate members on what's going on behind the scenes and provide them with some resources for things that can otherwise seem very mysterious, to them. I have contact with state chairs regularly through they have like a state chair's mailing list, and also through personal phone calls, and always offering to help them with whatever kinds of procedural problems they may have, and to get them to who they need for things that aren't within my wheelhouse. I have always been a big advocate of transparency, and that, I believe, encourages members to become invested because they feel as if they get to hear what's going on and their voices are being heard, even if they don't necessarily get their way. I have produced many tutorials for the LP Facebook page and also the YouTube channel on how to get involved with the Libertarian Party, how to follow the LNC list, any kind of procedure that I thought I could impart some value to the members. I believe that I have improved the format of the minutes for members. I believe the minutes are primarily for members and not necessarily primarily for the committee. So what do I mean by that? I implemented a numbering system for all motions so that if someone is going back to try to find something, it doesn't have to be this vague, I thought it was maybe at this meeting, or even it was at this meeting, but you're looking at minutes that the bulk of them are 40 pages or more long. If the motions are sequentially numbered, they'll know exactly how to find them. And those minutes are also then keyed to a master voting tally sheet so that someone can at a glance look at the voting record of the entire LNC. That they do not have to wait until convention where party members such as Chuck Moulton compiles these spreadsheets. It'll be very easy for him to do that this year because I'm keeping a running tally so that people can always see how their representatives are voting. I've also added certain appendices that I believe make the minutes easier to navigate, certain color coding, and also when it comes to the minutes, and actually the LNC meetings in general, I implemented an electronic notebook. For too many years, we were coming in with these printouts of pages, or some people had them by email, some people printed them out. People were scattered and trying to find what report we were referring to when, and that was just on the LNC. Members who were listening in would have no idea what we were referring to. So now for every meeting, I compiled a OneNote notebook that is tabbed, electronically tabbed, so that anyone can follow along. And this notebook is then preserved in the party records, sort of like the way we used to do in the past where printed notebooks were distributed to each LNC member, and then one copy of that notebook was preserved in the records. When we stopped doing that in order to preserve resources, both costs and trees and notebooks, there kind of was nothing for a while. There was a post on the LP site that would give links, but there wasn't anything in our physical archives that was easy to reference. So now we have that back again. And with that OneNote notebook, I try to do my minutes, or at least notes from my minutes, live. And I have people offering corrections or suggestions live because they can see what I'm taking down. And also the voting tallies are done live so that someone could see as the vote is going, including LNC members who are trying to keep track of who voted what, on a live Google spreadsheet. So I do believe that that is a tremendous improvement. I've also improved our policy manual. How so? Again, for member navigation and also LNC navigation, there used to be, and there still is, but just a PDF file. But it wasn't hot linked from the table of contents, so that if you look through the table of contents and you wanted to get to wherever it was, you had to scroll through. And sometimes with certain internet connections, that could be a pain in the butt. Well, now you could just click on that entry and it will take you directly to that page. That is something we should have had all along, and I've also done that with the party bylaws. I've had a cold lately, not coronavirus, but a cold, and I get a little froggy, so pardon me one moment. So also with the improved policy manual, I had, you know what happens when things get added to over the years? There are many different voices and many different styles, and it becomes sort of sloppy to read. So I undertook the project to do a complete policy manual style review, and that has now been completed, and that was done with the assistance of Miss Matson, whose input was invaluable. I've also worked on OPA Vote, which is to try to implement some electronic voting procedures in the LNC. And I don't mean like email votes. I mean like actual electronic ballots for when we're doing things that use different voting methods that might be a little difficult to keep track of, such as ranked choice voting, which I'm a huge fan of. I also went through and suggested style changes to the platforms. There were issues with inconsistency with Chicago Manual of Style, which is our style guide. I had also pushed for a convention voting process committee. I took a look at the way we did elections last convention, and I was like, God bless Miss Matson, but no, not today, Satan. I am not going through that. We needed to reform that, and that committee has done a tremendous job. Unfortunately, it's been somewhat waylaid by the current pandemic, but that work will not go to waste. At some point, it will be implemented, and convention will be a much pleasanter experience for all of us. Also, at LNC meetings, I now distribute a guest book. That makes people feel like their presence is recognized. They see their name in the minutes, but even more important than that, I do follow-ups with each of those members after the meetings. And for some people, getting a personal email from a national officer is a big deal to them, and it makes them feel much more engaged and welcome in the party, and I often can plug them in to becoming a national member, a state party member, or in some volunteer capacity. And I also follow up on each and every committee application of people who were not selected. That had fallen through the cracks in the past. And I think that makes volunteers feel as if they're taken for granted. And we could never, ever take them for granted. I also improved our e-meeting format by moving us over to Zoom from Adobe Connect. Adobe Connect was just clunky, and it was also way more expensive for what we were getting than Zoom. And I do believe that has made our e-meetings for both committees and the LNC much more pleasant. And if you remember in the past, we used to have a Ustream account, which cost us $100 a month. Due to the improvements that I helped implement with e-meetings, we are now able to save that money. We do not need Ustream. But while we did still have it, in order to make it more usable to members, I did create Ustream playlists and put chapters. But since then, I've now downloaded all of those old videos, so we did not lose them. And they will be archived on Lpedia. And speaking of Lpedia, that is the resource for the backlog of our party records. So everything that has happened, minutes, meetings, recordings, records, reports, since I've been on the LNC are being put onto Lpedia. And then I'll start working on the backlog. But I'm starting the culture of having that to be expected with, me forward. And I hope that certainly will continue, because that is the perfect way to keep track of the party records without using additional staff time and members being able to freely access them. I've also done donor calls with our past development director and our current development director. I do national party membership follow-ups for Colorado or any other state that would like me to assist with them. Also, something that I found coming onto the LNC that I have to be honest, it shocked me. And that is that there wasn't a central archive of, say, for instance, but I'm sure this holds true for other positions, what I needed as secretary. For the things I needed as secretary, I needed to get it from my predecessor, and presumably my successor would need to get it from me. I think that is just not a responsible way to handle records, and no business would handle records that way. I could disappear. I could have it all on one computer, which crashes and becomes irretrievable. These records need to be mirrored at the national office. It should not be solely in the possession of one person that is not staff. We shouldn't have to hound a prior volunteer for records. It should just be immediately accessible to us at headquarters. So everything that I've done is at party headquarters and can be used by a future secretary to improve upon. Anything that I have created is party property and can be edited and improved upon for the future. That, to me, is an institutional process that needs to continue. And I actually believe that sort of thing needs to be added to the job description of secretary, to be a records custodian of the Libertarian National Committee. Not of staff, but of the LNC. That is the job of many executive secretaries, and I do think that this position needs to morph into more like what an executive corporate secretary would look like and do. Also, to that end, I've taken off the hands of national staff the website updates for the information I'm responsible for, like the minutes, the policy manual, the platform, the committees. No staff time is spent on that, and I've made it pretty. I've made it consistent because there's one hand doing it. I also believe that that should be automatically a secretarial job and not a staff job. And there are many more little things I could add, but let me just mention one further thing. When we're deciding on committee applicants, fortunately now we're in the position where, say, for platform committee, we'll get over 100 applicants. That can be very difficult to navigate if you just go blah, and dump this pile of applications onto fellow LNC members. So I create electronic notebooks that are indexed with the people who have applied in alphabetical order and color-coded as to whether they are National Party members, whether they are state party members, as that information is valuable to some LNC members. And if they ever want any additional information, I will certainly add that in. But I think the secretary always needs to be thinking in that manner. And I believe that comes a bit from my experience as a paralegal, where we are constantly having to make the attorneys we work for lives easier, to make them look great. What makes an attorney look great is a great paralegal. So this can be at best a brief overview, but all of this was just a start at developing this position to truly be, as I said, an integrated position of executive secretary and records keeper. I do bring to this position my extensive legal background in working with massive quantities of records and litigation that requires tight and hygienic document maintenance procedures. So if you believe in this direction and my vision, I do ask for your vote. I'm not a member of any caucus. In 2018, when I became a party officer, I resigned all caucus involvement. I'm of the conviction that all, at least party officers, should not be members of caucuses for the good of the party. I actually believe that of all LNC members, but this is my personal conviction, and this is why I've done it. And I believe this frees caucuses to endorse qualified candidates from across factional barriers if they are the best for the needs of the party at that time. I can't promise you will always agree with my decisions, but I can promise that you will always be able to speak with me and that my decisions are based upon firm ethical considerations that most will appreciate and respect even if they do not agree. So thank you for your time, and I'll leave you with my email and phone number for any additional questions. My email is secretary@lp.org, and my phone number is 561-523-2250. Thank you for your time and have an awesome day.